What's the fastest you've seen someone quit or get fired? Didn't even make it to his desk. I was working for a telecom company back in the day. My team was developing a self-install program for cable modems. To tell you how long it was ago, the spec called for it to fit on a floppy disk just in case. Anyways, I hired a new employee. Looked completely normal. Average guy. I walk him to his workstation. I tell him this will be your desk. He just says nope and walks back out. Would never explain why. I'm still confused 16 years later. In 2007, I took a job at a staffing company. Early in the morning on my first day, I received another/better job offer via phone. When I came back from taking that phone call outside, I came back into my manager who looked very relieved. He thought I had left. He told me the person who previously held my position went on a lunch break and never came back. As soon as he said that, I knew my destiny. I took my lunch later that day and vanished. At the carnival, black guy walks over and asks to see the manager of this food area. The manager comes over, a tubby white guy with a big cowboy hat on. Black guy says he's looking for a job during the fair. Manager talks to him for about 2 minutes, then hires him. Manager says, so, where do you want to work? I need a boy running stock from the back to the grill, a boy working the rib grill, a boy running the condiments, and a boy on the till. Black guy says, are you going to be calling me boy the whole time? Manager says, no, I'll be calling you rib boy, stock boy, till boy, whatever job you wind up doing. Black guy says, nah, I won't be nobody's boy, and walks away. I got fired from Subway after 4 hours for putting too many olives on a sandwich. Art is not subjective when it's sandwiches, I guess. Edit. This happened in 2000. The rule was either 4 or 6 slices per sandwich, and someone asked for extra, so I sprinkled a handful on there. After that sandwich, the owner pulled me into the back and asked why I put so many olives on there. I told him the customer asked for extra, and he kind of sighed and said, I don't think this is going to work out. I went back the next day to turn in my green shirt and get my $20 back, had to pay for the uniform myself. I got fired from a busboy job in high school after 4 hours. I was running around clearing tables and trying to keep up when this old lady kept asking me for matches. I kept telling her to please ask her waitress since I had no clue where they were. She yelled at me. I forgot what it was, but it pissed me off, so I went to the front desk, found a big bowl of matches, and dumped them in her lap. It was right then I realized I had no business dealing with the public. She asked for a match, and you gave her 10,000 matches. I would have promoted you for going above and beyond. In high school, I got hired at Dairy Queen. I turned up for my first shift, and the manager went to the back to get my hat/shirt/name tag. While I waited, a family friend who owned a furniture store came out of the bathroom. And when I told him that I was working at Dairy Queen, he said, you don't want to work here. Come work for me instead. I did. As soon as the manager returned, I quit. All told, I was there less than 15 minutes. A guy, qualified butcher, turned up for his first day of work at a butcher shop and does what he is told to do until lunchtime. Then the boss, who was a real dick at times, caught him shooting up and fired him on the spot. Turns out the guy was a diabetic and was giving himself his insulin shot. Ended up suing the boss and winning. When I was in high school, I interviewed for a job as a claims agent for a windshield repair company. In a single phone call, I was told I was hired, but informed them I couldn't work weekends because of marching band, which they did not inquire about during the interview, and was then told that I was fired because of my unavailability. TLDR, under 2 minutes. Hired a carpenter to work on a youth jail in a remote village in AK. Told him it was a secure facility and he would need to pass a background check. He said no problem. Put all the paperwork in, flew him out first thing Monday morning to start work. He's on site less than 4 hours when the state troopers roll up and arrest him for an outstanding warrant. Needless to say, he was also fired. Where I work, we hired a sales rep and he started Monday morning. He left for lunch and never came back. We found out, apparently, through a couple of his mutual friends that he decided, while at lunch, to go live as a wanderer primarily in South America. Apparently, he went home, packed a bag, and headed south. Watched a woman ask the president of the company, "Who do you think you are?" When he asked her why she wasn't working, she was gone within the hour updates, and so many people asked, here's the story. The woman started working that morning, but since she didn't know what a login password was, she had the password, but didn't know what to do with it. She sat at her desk and read a trashy romance novel in front of her computer. When the president of the company walks by and sees her sitting there, he asks her why she's not working. She asked him who does he think he is, and that she never got her Yahoo account yet, her actual words. He said that he would look into it for her and asked her name. He marched into the HR office and said he wanted her gone. They walked her out about 5 minutes later. I worked for my dad, and as such I had what most would call a manager's position, but it was more like I just made sure the workers kept working when my dad was not around. Well, this guy, maybe 29 or so we hired, comes in on his first, and I greet him and start telling him what to do and how to do it, the usual. Well, I go off and do my own thing for maybe 20 minutes when one of our other employees comes back and says the new guy is flipping shit because he has to work for someone so much younger than him, and it's unfair that I have a higher position than him just because I am the boss's son and a bunch of other stuff. So I called my dad, and he told me that it is probably best to just send him on his way and to call the next person that had applied, so I fired him not even 28 minutes into the day. The company I used to work in hired temps. We worked outside in a brutal winter that year, and the work was pretty difficult if you haven't been in the industry. I had about 6 temps in a row quit on the first day, but the one that stands out told me he needed to go to the washroom. Quick time, 5 minutes into teaching him the job. We watched him get in his car. We were 5 minutes from the parking lot, but there was a fence between the site and the lot, and drive off. I gave him a call asking where he went. Maybe it's an emergency? He said he was in the washroom. No, we just watched you drive off in your car. He told me I was a fucking liar, so I asked him if he'll be back in 10 minutes. 10 minutes at most. I decided since there's been a wave of people quitting, I'll give him a break. Maybe he's insecure and can't use a public washroom. 2 hours later, he returns with McDonald's and asked, "It's lunchtime, right?" I couldn't believe he had the balls. I was an unofficial supervisor. Long story, but I told him to go home, and he was only getting paid the first hour he showed up. One time, I found a neat way to get past the screensaver on our registers without entering an ID or password. I showed this to a new coworker. The next day, he was fired for stealing money from the register. We had cameras watching the registers for employees trying to steal money. I knew this. He knew this. Everyone knew this because it's the first thing they tell you during employee training. A guy came into the restaurant that I worked at for training. He asked us, the rest of the servers, about how much we make a week in tips. We were busy on the weekends, but weekdays were pretty slow, so we made about $200 to $300 a week. Average was about $1,500 a month. He said that wasn't enough, that he was used to working in more fine dining where you could make $1,000 a week in tips, and left. I think it was about an hour in. We aren't fine dining, so I don't know what he was expecting. When I was in college, a friend and I were going to hang drywall. He supposedly knew how to do this. We had none of the right tools. We started working, and after an hour, the supervisor shows up. "You boys are not going to make any money doing this. Get out of here. Wherever you are, bless you, man." I quit a job before I even started. Accepted an offer at a car dealership selling brand new Hyundais. When they were doing reference checks, a previous employer of mine called me up and offered me a great salary with benefits and good vacation time. So I accepted, told the dealership what happened, and that I would not be able to work for them. They were very good about it and found it pretty ironic. I went to interview for a supposedly in-call, only call center. The boss told me after the interview to go ahead and start working since I was free for the rest of the day. Within 20 minutes of being told to call confirmed leads, which turned out to be people who had never heard of the company or the product I was suddenly supposed to be selling them, I gave the boss some form of medical emergency excuse about my girlfriend at the time and left. He tried calling me later that day, but I just didn't answer. I don't like being told that I'm going to be working for a company that is strictly one thing only to get there and see everyone doing something complete opposite. I took a motorcycle safety course. Final test was easy to pass, but hard to get a 100 on. One guy had been riding for years and aced it. Instructors said only a few people had done that. He popped a wheelie up the training course, and they immediately failed him. They said you can't do a victory wheelie in the safety corridor. I was a shift manager at an industrial paint shop. Had a new temp start, and him and the other employees were out on the dock waiting to clock in. One of the guys came and got me and said I needed to see something. I go out on the dock. He didn't know who I was yet. And he walks up with a little plastic cup and asked if I had any drink. I replied, "What, like alcohol?" He said, "Yeah." Fire him on the spot. There was a new girl who started as a host at the restaurant I work at. She was 18, and this was her first restaurant job, and she could only work 1 day a week due to a job conflict. She came in once. In the course of her duties that day, she locked herself in the walk-in fridge, which is unlocked at all times, and all you have to do is push against the door to get out. She banged on the door and yelled for help for a few minutes until a server heard and let her out. 2 people came in and went to the bar. She greeted them with a sing-song hello. An hour later when they left, she said goodbye in the same manner. The 2 patrons ignored her and left, at which point she calls them motherfuckers louder than she thought. A manager in training overheard. She never came back after that day. I work as the front office supervisor at a hotel, basically front desk supervisor, but made to sound fancy. I'm responsible for training in all new employees, and as a 22-year-old with somewhat of a baby face, I've experienced my share of people not taking me seriously. We had this one girl who had a terrible attitude from the moment she walked in the door. She told me during her first hour that she couldn't take me seriously on account of being so much older than me. She was 28. After about a week of her constantly talking shit about the hotel and everyone in it while standing within earshot of guests, I took her to the office and basically told her to smarten up and think about whether this was the right fit for her. She handed me her name tag and told me she wouldn't be back. TLDR, I have a baby face that makes people quit. When my dad was a teenager, he was hired by an assisted living place, more of a hospice situation than assisted living, and he walked in the front door on his first day of work and continued walking right out the back door. Never went back. He was probably there for a total of 5 minutes. He said the smell and the oppressive nature of the place was too much to even consider staying. 10 years ago, I had my first job at a call center. We had to call random old people to sell them stuff they don't need. I really needed the money, so I sat down and called my first number. A very nice old lady picked up, and I just couldn't stick to the script they gave me. We started talking about her grandkids and life in general. I didn't try to sell her anything. Instead, I finished our phone call after more than an hour, stood up, left, and never came back. I got fired at a cold slab creamery, knockoff Cold Stone Creamery. I think I got fired after about 3 hours because the owner said I wasn't doing a good enough job. All of the new employees I got hired with received no training whatsoever either. Turns out the owner just wanted to hire us to fill the time gap between the store being open and his relatives coming over from a different state a week later. Needless to say, I laughed my ass off when the store went under. I work as a team leader, under boss in a greenhouse with tomatoes. Second week, he only works Saturdays. Of a colic, he comes to me if he can go home because he was bored. I went to my boss and he said, sure, but he can't come back then. TLDR, guy was bored after 2 weeks and just left with permission. We hired a contractor to join our software development team. After all the workstation setup, project setup, and orientation, and an initial assignment, we gave him a more involved task. After 1 week, he stopped showing up and said the task was too complicated, etc. With all his work discarded, I finished said task in 4 hours. During basic training, we had a guy who, when the drill sergeants were yelling at us to get off the cattle truck and line up behind the barracks, ran off the cattle truck just like the rest of us, bear hugging his duffel bag, just like the rest of us, turned right instead of left unlike the rest of us, and apparently ran all the way off the post through the front gate and eventually made his way back home, only to be arrested for going AWOL. I have a story. T was a cashier at a liquor store. One day there was this raffle for a really cool longboard. T entered and had one. He's at his register messing with it until GM came over and was like, dude, you can't win. You work here. T is all like, what? No way, that's BS, I quit. And so he left without his longboard or dignity. And that's my story. My friend was asked by an elderly family friend to do some yard work for them. He was 15 and had no money and no skills, so he agreed. He got there, and when he saw the yard, it was completely overgrown, weeds everywhere, rubbish thrown everywhere, and a few dead cats rotting on the weeds. He thanked them for the opportunity and respectfully declined. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.